So as everybody comes in, I'm actually catching my breath as well. Just being in the kitchen all day, I had all these great intentions of going to put on snazzy clothes and whatnot, and that didn't quite happen. I wanted to really welcome everyone to Richmond. This is my hometown. I'm a third-generation Richmond resident, so this is really important for me to see two things that I really love kind of crossing paths tonight, and that is food and Richmond. So I was asked to kind of just welcome you all, but I also wanted to say a couple words about how important this particular Candidates Forum is. I think so often people take food for granted. It's like a backdrop. You don't really think about it as an important thing, even though if we went, 14 a month without it, we'd be dead. Like everyone on the planet needs it. But somehow it isn't really an important issue for so many people. It plays into so many big crises and challenges that are facing us every day when it comes to workers' rights. Food is front and central, food chain workers, farm workers. When it comes to climate change, long food chains, long supply chains, all the things, all the fuel that we put into our industrial agriculture system plays a huge role in climate change. But oftentimes climate talks about climate are relegated to energy and transportation, not food. I had a great conversation over the Soul to Soul week of action around the GCAST about what it means, what it would mean if we all took in the value of what a respectful plate would be. So not just that the food was grown in a way that didn't hurt the land, but the food was grown and it respected every worker who put their hands and the hours of their lives and their bodies on the line to bring that food to the table. That it was also respectful in the amounts that were put on the plate, because so much of the food that we produce gets wasted. It was respectful in the way of the plate that we use, because so often we get plates that we just use for 2 seconds and then throw away. So what does it mean to have a respectful plate? So we have these candidates, so we're going to have a candidates forum tonight, and I'm really excited to introduce one of my heroes. I don't know that much about her, but she's been, and her family has been in this area doing work in agriculture for so long. Mina Ichikawa of the Adachi family, right? Yeah. I used to go to Adachi when I was little and buy roses for my mom. It was just so, it was like this thing after school. So I'm really proud to introduce her. She's going to moderate tonight, and I'm really excited that these two candidates for Assembly 2015 have come to actually engage on food. Where do you stand? So, thank you so much. And
Hi, thank you so much, Doria, for the great introduction. Is this the right thing? Okay.
Yeah.
How does this sound? Better? Okay. Hi. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much to the organizers, and thank you so much to Doria for the wonderful introduction. Like she said, my family has really deep roots in this area, back to when it was just farmland since the turn of the last century. So I'm very invested in the future of this district, and I'm so pleased that we could pull this event off today. Thank you so much to Doria and Urban Tilth for preparing the food using produce from urban farms here in Richmond. As I mentioned, this event wouldn't have been possible without a diverse coalition of host organizations. Everyone really worked so hard. By the way, if anyone wants to have a seat, there's lots of seats over here, so come on in. Here, over here. We'd love to have you. Those organizations are Alameda County Community Food Bank, California Food and Farming Network, the Center for Food, Faith, and Justice, the Ecology Center, the Oakland Food Policy Council, and Urban Tilt. And there's also a long list of organizations, as you can see on the wall out there, that collaborated as supporters to make this event possible, including my organization, Berkeley Food Institute. So thank you to everyone who put in so much work to make this happen. Many of you work with those organizations, and thank you for your work just every day making our food system and our society better. Just something to keep in mind, none of these organizations are endorsing a candidate. Instead, they are excited to offer the candidates a chance to share their views with the public and respond to questions on a variety of food and agriculture issues that our next assembly member will be addressing when she goes to Sacramento. We are live streaming this forum on Facebook Live, and we hope that you'll tweet and post throughout using the hashtags, hashtag food in the 15th, hashtag AD15 or Assembly District 15, and hashtag elections 2018. So no matter what you come away with tonight, we just want to make sure that you're registered and make sure that you vote and make sure that you take everyone with you to vote. And we hope that this event will generate even more excitement in these midterms, which are so crucial for our district and our country. We also have a photographer, Brooke Anderson, with us tonight. Raise your hand high. This is Brooke. If you do not wish to be photographed, you can either raise your hand now, or if you prefer, step aside and tell Brooke at any point this evening. Is there anyone who's, I guess we're really calling you out to say, identify yourself to be anonymous, but anyway, that's Brooke. And I guess I'd like to now just introduce the candidates by name and title, and then I'm going to really let them get into more of who they are. On the end of the stage is Buffy Wicks, a community organizer and children's advocate. And here is Jovanka Beckles, Richmond City Council member and mental health specialist. And thank you both to you dynamic women leaders for coming tonight and taking your time. And by the way, I'm reading information about them from my County of Alameda Voter Information Guide, which I hope is waiting for you at home, and you can start preparing it and getting ready, so there's no 11th hour decisions here. So the way that we're gonna, let me just go over the format. This is not a debate like anyone's trying to get each other. This is just a chance to really hear more about their policy stands and dig deeper. So here's how we're gonna do it. We're gonna have 2 short introductory questions. We're gonna have a series of 8 questions, and these questions have been formulated by the event hosts. And these are very passionate activists from the Bay Area who have put a lot of time and heart into trying to make sure that the questions represent the work that they do tirelessly year after year. So thanks for listening to questions even if they might not be in your area of interest. Then we'll have moderated questions from the audience, and I'll explain when we get to that about how that'll work. We really want to hear everyone's voice, but also we want to cut out anything that wouldn't apply to both candidates or that doesn't relate to the topics at hand. And then we'll have a minute and a half for closing statements from both of the candidates, and they can sort of wrap up their views. We're aiming to finish, as Beth said, by about 8:15. We're not going to keep you here all night. Some of us have kids that got to go to bed, so there will be time, I guess, for side conversations after. We have a timekeeper. Let me give some instructions now to our candidates. We have a timekeeper here, Shanti, from Alameda County Food Bank. Shanti will signal with a piece of paper when you have 30 seconds remaining. Wow, laminated. We got it all under control. After that signal, if you reach the time limit, she will signal with the following sound. Okay. And we're going to have a coin toss. Did the coin toss already occur? About who's going to start? Not yet? Okay, let me do that right now. And for those in the audience who would like to have a question, we have placed a question card on each seat. To propose a question, please write your name and the question clearly on the card and pass it to Navina, Anna, and Allison. Please raise your hands. Navina, Anna, and Allison. Oh, thank you. Thank you, my wallet. It will be circulating throughout the audience, throughout the forum. So you can start to write your questions. We will have the person who wrote the question read it to the candidates, so please include your name. We wanted to give community members a chance to speak, but we also do want to moderate the questions to make sure that they're all fair and germane to the topic. So this is the half-half solution we came to. So please write your name if you want to write your organization, or if you don't have an affiliation, that's fine. But we hope this way we can really hear questions and the candidates get to see your faces and dialogue with you. So my job tonight is to make sure that we get lots of questions in, things are kept fair, and that they're kept civil. We stay focused on food, and we eat some good food, and we have a good time. So, and with that, let's begin. Oh, the coin toss. That up, please. Okay, so who wants to call? Heads. Okay, Beckles calls heads, and it is. Wait, it's tails. It's tails. I couldn't tell from this new quarter. This is tails. So Buffy goes first. By the way, how would you like me to address both of you?
Jovanka.
Jovanka? Okay, great. So we have a lot of important policy issues to get into, but I want to start with a question. Just understand quickly about you. What is a recent food business that you've enjoyed in the District 15 district, and why did you like it?
Sure. You all look at me okay. Well, thank you very much, by the way, for having us. I really enjoy these types of forums that are really specific on the issue, and food is so critical across the board. It brings families together, it brings communities together, it brings cultures together, and it hits every single issue. So really appreciate being here. Recently, I enjoyed a delicious tea leaf salad at Burma Superstar, and I've been a vegetarian for 25 years, so I tend to visit restaurants that cater to my needs. But I really enjoyed the place. It's delicious. It's not far from my neighborhood, so I'm a big fan of Burma Superstar.
Awesome. Thank you. And what about you?
Thank you, first of all, for putting this forum on. This is wonderful, and the food at Urban Tilt is wonderful. I've had the pleasure of having it so many times. Doria always puts so much love into it, and you can taste it, you can see the love. So thank you so much. I hope to get a little bit about when this is over. Let's see, today had a brunch, because I had a late breakfast. Buffy and I were on a radio show this morning, so by the time I got to eat, it was around 1 o'clock, and I had an opportunity to go to Sam's Log Cabin right here in El Cerrito, Albany. I love that place. It's the fried chicken. Oh my goodness, it's to die for. And then before that, I was at Elevation 66, and before that, Benoit Casper. There's so many wonderful places to eat right here in our neighborhood. So thanks for that question.
We could spend all night on that question, but we're going to try to move on to the hard-hitting questions here. So, by way of introduction, please tell us about your record and vision on food systems issues for Assembly District 15 and California as a whole. And each of you will have 2 minutes to respond. Why don't we switch out who goes first for each question? Yeah, so, please go first. Thank you.
So my record, as many of you know, I've lived and worked right here in the district for the last 30 years. I have been employed for Contra Costa County for 18 years right here in Richmond. Worked at Rubicon programs as well for about 3 years. Rubicon in the house. So I have deep roots here, but it's my record of being on the Richmond City Council for the past 8 years, and before that, the Planning Commission for 2 years. Before that, Economic Development Commission. I've had an opportunity to really serve my community. But as a Richmond City Council member, we have had the honor of funding urban farms like Urban Tilt, funding urban farms, our local elementary schools like Birdie. Birdie has a wonderful farm that they teach the kids. And before Adam had closed, they also had a farm, which is where the new Adams Crest farm is. And I've had the opportunity to fund these types of programs to really advocate to not only advocate but participate in programs like the Richmond Food Policy. In addition to that, I also not in my capacity as a city council member, just as a Richmond resident. I order the CSA boxes as well. I get my box every other week, and that is fresh, organic fruit, because I think it's important that we support our local farmers. And so my wife and I, we order what we can. We buy our honey from our local honey farmer, Adam, and so that's how I've been supporting our efforts right here in Richmond for as long as I've lived here.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Oh, there you go. Well, I've spent the last 20 plus years as an organizer in a wide variety of capacities. I'm born and raised here in California. I've lived in the Bay Area on and off for the past 20 years, but my work has certainly taken me to other places as well. And as it pertains to food issues in particular, I work for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, one of the co-sponsors of this event, and then saw there sort of firsthand the impact of the disparities up and down the food supply chain. But specifically that work, I was working to hold Walmart accountable on a lot of their labor practices and challenges that those workers face at Walmart. So we certainly touched on the issues there. I worked on the passage of the Affordable Care Act, working for President Obama, and there were provisions within that legislation that really put more resources into preventiveness and wellness and nutrition components, and making sure that we were, subsidizing local healthy food for low-income communities in particular. So that certainly had a food component. In my work, I was an organizer and campaign director for Common Sense Kids Action, which is a parent mobilizing program where we focus specifically on nutrition for kids, and looking at the fact that 1 in 4 kids are hungry in California every single day, and the disparities and the racial disparities within that issue. And we advocated on a number of issues at the state level, but also at the federal level as well, on supporting things like the Early Childhood Improvement Nutrition Act of 2016. And then I did some work also with Plate of the Union, which was an organization, a campaign that was put together by a variety of different organizations, really trying to infuse food into the public policy debate. And Tom Colicchio was the sort of face of that effort when I was doing that work, and lending his sort of celebrity to this cause. And so I've touched on this issue in a variety of ways as an organizer. In terms of the vision, maybe we'll get to this a little bit later, but you look at California and the fact that we grow a third of the nation's vegetables here, and 2/3 of the nation's fruits and nuts, and yet we have 13% of our population doesn't have access. These are things we have to fix.
Great. So let's move on to the questions, and we'll have a chance to hear more about all of your visions as we go through, and definitely at the end. So the first question really was top priority for everyone involved, and I'll have Buffy take it first. In District 15, 1 in 5 people are living in poverty, which is higher than the state average. While programs like CalFresh, Wicks, SSI, and CalWorks are federally funded, the state also has a vital role in funding, supporting, and running these programs to help our most vulnerable community members. So there's a question about the state's role. For example, the state-funded portion of SSI was cut to the bare minimum during the recession, pushing seniors and people with disabilities, who are primarily women and people of color, below the poverty line and into food pantry lines. These cuts have never been restored. Assemblymember Thurmond has been a champion of these programs in the legislature. What would you as an assembly member do to protect and strengthen these programs and improve the accessibility and connectivity between safety net services?
Well, I think these programs are very critical, and we see what's happening also federally, the federal landscape, the fact that the Farm Bill hangs in kind of limbo in the Michigas that is our Washington, D.C. politics right now. And with that is funding for SNAP or our CalFresh programs. So advocating for these, pushing for these. If the federal government is not able to, for whatever reasons, supply the resources that we need to ensure these programs are fully funded, I believe it is the role of the state government to come in and do that. And we, for the first time in a long time, finally had a budget surplus in California, so it would be my hope that some of those resources would be spent. But I think, increased funding for CalFresh, I think, is important. If you look at CalFresh, for a lot of families, it only lasts 2 to 3 months out of the year. What do you do the rest of those other weeks? Or sorry, 2 to 3 months, 2 to 3 weeks out of the month. What do you do for those other weeks in the month? So we have to subsidize that. I support, AD15, which is the Hunger Impact Act, which would give more resources. There's also SB 900, which allows for more resources for California-grown fruits and vegetables for low-income families. So these are some of the tangible policy things I think we need to do. Investing in our emergency food assistance, supporting groups like the Alameda County Community Food Bank, I think is important. We have to invest in these resources and also ensure that folks that are eligible to sign up are signed up, because right now only about 70% of folks that are eligible are signed up. That number should be at 100.
Jovanka?
I believe that the Farmer Equity Act 2017, SB 1348, because that passed, that's a good thing. However, I know that these are the kinds of policies that often don't get funded, and so it's so important that we fund these kinds of policies. It's so important that we understand and that our elected officials understand that we have to put people over profit in every single policy. And so, running as a candidate who will always put people over profit, you can count on me, you can trust me to always do the right thing as it pertains to the community. The Cal Fresh program, and one individual you can't make over $15,000 a year. That's ridiculous. Who can live on $15,000 a year? And then of course it goes up. 2 people, no more than something like $20,000. No family can live that way. And so I think that it's important that we have a champion, we have an advocate who will advocate for changing that. And I know a lot of these things, it's all about the federal government and what they're doing, and it affects us. But I really believe that as Californians and the radical beings that we are, we can insist that our federal government do the right thing by working together with our federal legislators.
As it turns out, our audio system is just going to cut people off at the time, and we're giving you, I know, you're being interrupted by static. We do have a hard situation. We're asking very specific, very directed questions, and we're not giving you that much time to answer, so sympathy's there, but we don't blame you if you just jump right into the wompery. So next question is on food systems workers, and for Jovanka first. Over 2 million Californians, or 13% of the state's workforce, work in the food system, including farm labor, processing, distribution, and sales. 66% of those workers earn below $15 an hour, compared to 29% in other industries. Food systems workers also face high rates of injury, illness, and harassment. Since the obstacle for many people to obtain healthy food is the lack of living wage jobs, it's perhaps not surprising that 23% of food systems workers use food stamps, or SNAP. Can you give us some concrete examples of what you will do to raise wages and protect food systems workers' rights if elected?
I can tell you what I will do based on what I've already done. So I'm not going to just sit here and make promises to you. I will talk about what I've done as an elected official in Richmond for the past 8 years. And in Richmond, we have our minimum wage right now. We brought forward, along working in conjunction with the community, which is how I operate. We started out with a $12 an hour minimum wage, and that recognized that wasn't enough. And now Richmond's minimum wage is $13.41. As of 2019, by next January, our minimum wage in Richmond will be $15 an hour. And so at the federal level, at the state level rather, I will advocate for a living wage for Californians in the 5th largest economy in the world, within the largest economy in the world. We absolutely have the resources to do that, to pay our workers what they're worth, and it's also important that we bring those workers, we bring those that are affected to the table to hear, because that's how policy is best done, is by listening to those who are most affected.
I think, can you hear me? Okay, there we go. I think, there's a number of things I think we can do at the state level, but most specifically, first and foremost, we've got to raise wages, which is really important. These workers, as you just mentioned, are very underpaid. I think part of that comes with unionizing workers. I think that's very critical. Having those collective bargaining rights is really important, and I'm proud to be endorsed by the UFCW and have done work with them, so I think they play a vital role. Also, our Farm Workers Union, very critical as well. And you look at the plight of the farm workers in this state, and to me, this is one of the most morally imperative issues that we can face as a state. Facing often very harsh working conditions, underpaid, unsafe working conditions, exposed to pesticides. So this is one of the issues that I think we have to really address head on. I think we need to support things like apprenticeship programs as well, to continue education and be able to increase wages in that way. And then the other thing we need is broader safety nets, supporting things like single-payer health care. Ensuring that our food workers have access to health care, that it's affordable, that it's not causing folks, their homes because of the cost of health care, the prohibitively high cost of health care in the state. So I think we need to create a whole suite of social safety nets. Also, of course, access to quality and affordable food, but it comes with increased wages, unionization, single-payer health care, and a whole suite of things.
Great, thank you. I feel like the issues of how these are all connected, I don't need to explain to either of you. You've already touched on it, and thank you for both of your work on it so far. The next question is on immigration food workers. And I guess we'll have Buffy go first on this one. ICE raids have become a daily part of life for many workers throughout the food system, from agriculture to restaurants. The New York Times reports that federal immigration policy is having a direct impact on California's agricultural labor supply, which is made up of 95% of immigrants, and the price of food is expected to increase. What do you think is the legislature's role in keeping food systems workers safe and enforcing our sanctuary state status in agriculture?
So I basically oppose everything the Trump administration is doing when it comes to our immigration policy, and fully support sanctuary state policy at the state level, at the city level, and do not believe that it is the role of our police officers to be tearing up communities and working as an agent of ICE, and would do anything in my power to advance a more just immigration policy here in California. I think it's incumbent upon our governor and our next governor and our AG to implement sanctuary state law and to continue to fight the Trump administration on this issue, because I think it's very, very, very critical. As it pertains to how we can protect these communities, I think one big critical issue is ensuring that our immigrant community has access to health care. A lot of our undocumented workers do not have that access. So I think that's a very important thing. Access to schooling, another big issue that I think is very important. You also look at women who are working in the fields, and the instances of rape and sexual assault within this community is horrifying. What we have to make sure we create safe spaces for those women to be able to speak out and to speak up and to get the resources that they need, that are very, very critical. So I think there's a number of things that we can do at the state level to ensure this, along with, again, that sort of broader social safety net that I think is so important.
I think it's absolutely imperative. It's absolutely our responsibility as elected officials to protect all of our residents, regardless of their immigration status. And in Richmond, again, I'm really proud of having brought forward policy. Richmond, when I first was elected, and actually going up I was elected first time 2010. By 2012, I started working in collaboration with the community to create a municipal ID program. And we did that with the thought of helping our undocumented residents to be able to participate in our community fully. So with the municipal ID program, our residents were able to bank, get library cards. Our residents were able to identify and report issues in their communities without fear of not having any kind of an ID. And being the Richmond that we are, the innovative Richmond that we are, the state later decided to grant a driver's license to all residents regardless of immigration status. So I'm really proud that Richmond led the way, and this is something that I've done, and this is how I will act in Sacramento as well on behalf of the residents. But I also brought forward, and we voted Richmond as a sanctuary city. I'm really proud of that as well. Again, way ahead of the state. But I also believe that another way that we can help and protect our residents is by not enabling them to vote. Everyone should be able to vote regardless of immigration status as well.
Ooh, I wish we had time to talk about voting access, but we don't. But so many topics left on the table. But the next one is about housing, which is unavoidable, even in a discussion about food. High housing costs, displacement, and homelessness are huge problems in District 15 that affect residents' access to healthy food and to health care. What is the legislature's role in addressing the housing crisis? And in particular, what is your view on Costa-Hawkins repeal and how it relates to preserving agricultural land by limiting sprawl?
Yes. So I believe that one of the ways that we help keep our community members from being displaced, particularly communities of color like Richmond, is to pass affordable housing policies. So I support Prop 10. But in the meantime, we have to remember that we have to build more affordable housing. And I'm really proud, once again, to have been in service to Richmond residents, that we have built several low-income affordable housing right here in Richmond. We have 4 more on the way that I'm proud that I voted for. People have to feel secure. We don't have enough affordable housing, but we have the means to do that. Right? We have the means. Again, the 5th largest economy in the world, we have the means to be able to do that. We can tax vacant properties. We can protect homeowners from speculators. Right? This is what stabilizes our communities. And we do that, we build more affordable housing with the revenue that we get from taxing vacant properties, and as well as protecting homeowners. When you have a city, for example, like in Oakland, built 4,000 new luxury item homes, right? Only 324 of those homes were low income. I think that's a shame, and we have to do something at the state level. But we also have to deal with what you mentioned, and that is the root causes of homelessness. And share the bill, housing for all, and we can do it.
Thank you. She's adorable, by the way. We're about 2 million homes shy of where we need to be in California. We have the lowest number of homes given the population that we have, and so we dramatically, I believe, need to build more homes. I support transit-oriented housing, building around our BART stops, investing in public transportation along with that, and creating more affordable housing for all of the residents of the district, I think is important. And we want to work with a number of folks in Sacramento to do that, and I've supported the housing package that was put forth last year and some of the proposals that David Chu, chair of the Housing Committee, and others have put forth. I also think, combined with that, we have to do everything we can to guard against displacement, which is a huge issue in the East Bay. I support reforms around Costa-Hawkins. I'm not supporting the measure that's on the ballot as it is, because I share the concern that many affordable housing experts have, that it can exacerbate a housing crisis by halting the construction of new homes, which we desperately need in this state. But I strongly believe we need reforms around it, do something like a rolling date or something to that effect that could be a legislative fix. In addition to that, anti-gouging legislation. We cannot have landlords charging 30, 40, 50, 60% increases in rent. It is unfair. It would be one of the first things I would introduce in Sacramento is anti-gouging legislation. I think this is critical. Also, giving renters facing unfair eviction a legal defense fund. And when you level the playing field, turns out eviction rates come down significantly. Creating a rental assistance fund or increasing the renter tax credit, I think, is another mechanism that we should do. So there's a suite of things that I think we should put in place.
Thank you both so much for heeding the bell. And I have an announcement for the audience. It's about our question cards. We're now halfway through the prepared questions. And if you have a question, please submit it on the card and pass it either to Anna or Navina. And you can also raise your hand if you didn't get a card. Does anyone need a card? Again, put your name and your question, and now is the time to start getting them in so they can pick your question. So my next question, which Buffy will go first, is about small farmers. Many of California's agricultural producers are marginalized within the national and international food system. They operate on slim margins with high resource inputs. I have a little bit of extra help here. Like water, land, and labor. For the state's 25,000 farmers and ranchers of color and 14,000 female farmers, they tend to own less land, make less money. I'm going to need some assistance here. Sorry, guys. For the state's 25,000 farmers and ranchers of color and 14,000 female farmers who tend to own less land, make less money, and receive less government support than their white counterparts, these issues are even more severe. What is the state's role in supporting marginalized farmers, and how would you ensure that this critical occupation is preserved for the next generation?
Sure, so I support the Farmer Equity Act in 2017 and think we need to make sure that that is fully implemented, fully funded, and has some gusto behind it so that it actually becomes a real thing, and we make sure that our socially disadvantaged farmers have the resources that they need. I also support the idea of creating a Farmer Equity Advisory Committee that would then be in the California Department of Food and Ag. I think this is another important mechanism to ensure that these farmers have a voice at the table and a seat at the table. Above and beyond all of that, we have to make sure that our small farmers are front and center in all of our policy conversations. As I understand it, they're not at the table right now in the way that they need to be. So I think ensuring that these farmers, these voices, the advocates of this community are front and center when we're talking about farm policy, water policy, labor policy, you know, all of the areas that impact these farmers, I think is critical. The fourth thing I would say is ensuring that there's technical assistance for the farmers, that they have that, but they also have access to capital and access to resources. As with many small businesses across the state, that's a critical component as well. So ensuring there's technical assistance available, and expanding programs like the California Nutritional Incentive Program are other ways I think that we can ensure that our small farmers and our socially disadvantaged farmers have the resources that they need.
Yes. So the Farmers Equity Bill Act, farmers from across the state provided lots and lots of recommendations, and as your next assembly member, I would heed those recommendations, listen to them, bring them to the table, because it's so important that people of color in particular, especially as we're talking about food justice, have a voice, have a seat at the table. That's one of the things that has not happened, and having, I believe, a woman of color who understands and sees the injustice right here, that we see right here in Richmond with our farmers of color. I believe it's so important that we bring them to the table. But I also believe that it's important that I would support land trusts to empower our small farmers. I believe that would go a long way, because public land should belong to the people.
Thank you. Well, you both are champs in terms of rolling with all of these questions, and we're just jumping all around. The next one is on agriculture's. Thank you. Is mine still working?
No.
Ag's impact on the environment. Food and agriculture are often left out of climate change discussions at the local and state level, although agriculture and the greater food system both contribute to climate change and offer promising solutions. Are there any current state programs that you see as a solution, and what will be your plan to address the food and farming system's role in climate change? And this will be Jovanka first.
Well, first of all, we have to have elected officials who are going to stand up to big ag, stand up to corporations. And how do you know, how do you trust that the person you elect is going to do that? Well, you do that, you can trust that by looking at voting record, by looking at track record, period. And in my track record right here in Richmond, you've seen me stand up to big corporate polluters right here in Richmond. And so you can trust me to continue to do that, to continue to put the needs of people, the needs of the planet above corporate profit. You can trust me to do that. I also believe that we have to have, radical, bold solutions at the state level. We have to stop fracking. We have to stop digging. We have to stop bomb trains, coal trains from coming through our cities. When you live in Richmond, you really see so much injustice as it pertains to communities of color and our food system, as it relates to big corporations. I remember years ago when we had the huge Chevron fire in 2012. I remember so many neighbors coming forward and complaining in tears about how their products, their farms, their gardens were destroyed. And so we have to have people who are going to stand up to corporations and big ag.
So about 8% of our greenhouse gas comes out of ag, and I think there's some very specific things the state can do to help address some of this, but we have to make sure that the farmers have the technical assistance and resources that they need. You know, I know there was very specific programs that were passed in 2014, climate smart ag grant programs that gave grants to farmers to be able to ensure that they were implementing these programs the right way, and we've seen a huge positive impact on that in terms of its implication to the overall greenhouse gas impact in the state. So those types of programs I think we should continue to do. You know, I know that those programs that, you know, specifically this Healthy Soils program and other things like that have reduced greenhouse emissions by over 42.5 million metric tons in California. So I think continuing to do those types of things is very important, you know, especially when you're thinking through the smaller farmers, making sure that they have the technical assistance that they need, but also tackling the pesticide issue, I think is an important thing that we have to do, and using smarter farming techniques that don't rely on pesticides. Pesticides have a major negative impact in the communities across the board in which they're where they exist, but all the way up the chain. You know, you see negative impacts in terms of the children that are growing up in these communities. So really hitting this issue head on and putting some state resources into how we can do that, I think is another critical piece of this.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Our next question is on school meals. School meals play a critical role in feeding California's 2.3 million food insecure children. Isn't that just mind-blowing and infuriating? Especially for the growing number of working poor and homeless students in this district. Unfortunately, the majority of California schools continue to serve pre-made, heat and serve meals, sometimes made with low-quality ingredients, and many low-income students don't eat school meals due to stigma, cost, or other accessibility issues. What action would you take to encourage all schools to procure and prepare good, fresh food for California students, particularly for those whose families struggle to afford the food they want at home?
This is an important issue because those habits of nutrition are set at a very young age. And so if children at a young age are not getting the type of nutritional value that they need, they're then set on a path, right? And we have a paradox here in California where you have 1 in 4 children every day go hungry, right? 1 in 4 go hungry, and yet we also have a 33% obesity rate, which means we're not eating nutritional food. A lot of our children are not eating nutritional food. So a couple of things I think we need to do on this. You know, there's a edible schoolyard project that's born here in AD15 that Alice Waters has put together. These types of programs that really incentivize student-led urban gardening type programs. These types of things I think are a really innovative way that not only help create nutritional habits, but also teach students the value of growing food locally and incentivizing those types of things. I think we need to publicly fund more farm-to-school programs, incentivizing our urban farms and making sure we have our urban communities have access to those resources. And then, of course, you know, ensuring that we have fully funded, you know, SNAP, CalFresh programs, which we've already talked about tonight.
We, again, have to always put the needs of people above profit, right? I'm a mental health worker. I've been working right here in Richmond for 18 years. So my lived experience, my experience of seeing children that I work with every single day go to school hungry. When kids are hungry, they can't learn. So what I would do at the state level is I would absolutely advocate and fully fund. We have to fully fund our school systems. The fact that schools' resources has dwindled in years tells you something. When I was growing up, many of you remember growing up, we had a cafeteria lady. We had a cafeteria. We had like fresh food that was being prepared right there. And the children that I work with, I have a couple of kids, they will not eat that food. They said, Miss Jovanka, it's nasty. And if they don't eat their food, then it's really difficult for them to learn. So I would advocate, I would fully fund our schools and advocate for fresh food products. We can fund and support our local farmers like Urban Tills, right? Like the farms we have up there at Adam Crest. Why would stop us from doing this throughout the state, having our local urban farms produce the food that they then take to the school district, that they then prepare themselves. There are programs that we could vote, we could fund that teach kids to cook. I remember we had, cooking classes in school, so fully fund our schools.
Thank you. This is your last chance to submit a question, and then we're cutting it off. So I would hate if you get a last-minute inspiration. So try to pull it out now and write it down and wave it up in the air so that our moderators can catch it. I guess our last pre-prepared question is on a really important issue right now, which is sugar-sweetened beverage taxes. Both Berkeley, Oakland, and Albany have passed taxes on sugar-sweetened beverages, in large part to address the unequal health impacts of sugar-sweetened beverages on communities of color and low-income communities. Richmond was revisiting the idea before the beverage industry backed a preemption bill that prohibits municipalities from passing taxes on food or soda at the local level for 12 years. What is your opinion on the preemption issue, and would you support a statewide soda tax if it came before the state legislature?
The answer is absolutely yes. Richmond was the first city in the Bay Area that brought forward a sugar-sweetened beverage tax. We were going to do that. And then the beverage company came into our city, lied about all the same things that happens now. They scare us into voting against our own best interests. And they scared us by saying, your grocery bill is going to go up if you vote for this tax. Even though that money was going to go towards sports activities for our children in our community, to have more parks and more activities. And they did that, and they lied to us. And then we actually have a bill, a children's first bill that we passed unanimously, and we were going to use a sweet, soda tax, let's just say soda tax, to make that happen, to be able to fund it. But what happened? Sacramento, the politicians there, they passed that. And that's why we always have to remember, when people say, why is money in politics so important? Why is it so important where a candidate or an elected official get their money? It's because of reasons like that. Because when you have elected officials, candidates who are taking money from the very people who are not operating in our best interest, we are not going to get the things that we need. So it's so important for us to be able to have corporate-free, people-powered, people-first elected officials. And I want to get I wanted to say what stood up to Monsanto. We passed a bill right here in Richmond to ban what is it called, Roundup, pesticides. We did that right here.
So Jovanka got one overtime, so you get an overtime too.
Oh yeah, no. I will yield some of my time. I absolutely unequivocally oppose the ban. I think if local municipalities want to have a soda tax, yes. If there's a statewide ballot measure on soda tax, yes. If that money can go to funding nutritional programs, educational programs, I think that is critical. I would work with advocates to help turn over that law in whatever way that I could, and try to get our ability to implement that. I agree with the soda tax. I think soda is incredibly harmful. It's incredibly corrosive. And I support any kind of soda tax that's out there. And a huge kudos to the Ecology Center, who I know did a lot of work in Berkeley helping to get that passed. Really a community-driven effort, which is exciting. I also know that there was a bill recently that encourages restaurants to serve water or milk to kids. Those types of things I totally support and think we should be doing that. But that's my position on the soda tax.
Thanks so much. So now we're going to get into questions from the audience, and maybe should I give the mic to Navina or Anna to call out who they're going to ask?
Thanks, and I think we're going to have time for about 5 questions from the audience. Thanks so much for submitting your question cards to us, and we're going to tell you whose question is next, and then which is the next one on deck, so that you can be ready for that too. So our first question asker is going to be Alexa. And Alexa, I'll bring the mic to you, and then next up on deck is going to be Debbie.
Hi, thank you so much. It's been fascinating to hear both of you speak. So Alexis Owen with the Center for Good Food Purchasing. And my question is, how can the state of California use its purchasing power and its role as a major provider of food for some of our most vulnerable populations to support a more equitable food system?
Well, it's an interesting question. You know, I think a couple of the things that we can do. You know, we right now currently provide tax incentives for companies like Amazon.com to come in with their distribution centers who have very unfair labor practices. To me, we shouldn't be doing that, right? We should have a code of conduct for corporations in terms of how they conduct their business, whether it's handling food, paying workers, you know, a wide variety of things, and make sort of a good housekeeping seal of approval for them to be able to get those types of tax incentives. So I think there's things that we can do there that could have an impact on food in terms of how it's distributed and purchased and distributed. So I think there's other kind of creative ideas that we can do. We do have obviously huge sort of purchasing power, as you said, here in California, and if we can model smart legislation here and require it here, then we have a good ability to do that across the country. We saw this with cafe standards, for instance. You know, I think we can do this around food. I think we can do this around workers' rights, which is another way we can drive a lot of the innovative public policy here in California that can then have an impact on these issues. So if you have ideas on this too, I'd love to work with you on it, but I think those are some of the things that we could do.
And I think shipping food from across the world is not sustainable. It's not good for our planet. It's not good for our humans, right? So I believe that at the state level, we can and should purchase from small farmers and urban farms. I don't believe we should continue to encourage unsustainable methods of growing foods and distributing foods from big food and ag corporations.
So we know that there was a school food question that was asked before, but by the sheer number of questions that came in around school food, we couldn't resist to get another one in. So a number of you didn't write your names on your cards, a few of you did. So I just want to call out, if you want to just stand up and wave so they can see that you also care about this issue. Mariella, Sequoia, Taylor, other people who wrote school food cards, if you want to just stand up or wave. Thanks for putting those in. And Debbie, you want to ask your question.
Thank you. I'm Debbie Friedman with Conscious Kitchen. And as you mentioned, the majority of California school children are dependent on school food for the majority of their nutrition. But most public schools don't have the infrastructure or the food service staffing or training, which is required to provide the scratch-cooked, local, organic food for students, even if the schools wanted to do so, as I know many schools do, especially here in Richmond. So how do you intend to work towards improving this situation? And what are your thoughts about addressing school food issues, which are going to require capital investments and revaluing food as an integral part of the education system? Thanks.
Thanks, and you are up next.
It's possible to do. Again, it's one of those things that were cut, right? When you know, so much of our funding to school was cut. We saw a lot of that happening, dwindling, resources dwindling after, you know, we brought in, you know, Prop 13, which is why I think we need to reform Prop 13. First of all, that's going to bring a lot of money, billions of dollars back into our communities. So we can do it. We can do it. In the 5th largest economy in the world, we can do it. So that was one of those services that was cut, along with our music programs, along with our you know, home ec and vocational programs. And so I will advocate to reinstitute these things, to reinstate these things back into our school districts, to make our schools the leader that it once was in the country.
I think, you know, two things on this, right? One is the resources. And we used to have the best public education system in the country. People moved west to raise their families here. That all started to change in 1978 with the passage of Prop 13. To me, one of the biggest challenges facing our school system across the board is Proposition 13. And I wholeheartedly believe, and will work to my bone, whether I get this job or not, to reform Prop 13 in 2020. It's going to be on the ballot. You all get the opportunity to vote on it. If we close the commercial loophole on Prop 13, make Chevron, Transamerica, Disneyland pay their fair share, it would be about $11.4 billion that could go back into our state budget, of which we can use some of that for school nutrition programs. So I think the resources pieces is a big piece of it, right, to your point. But the second thing is intentionality and leadership around the issue, and ensuring that food advocates are at the table when we're thinking about this, that this is part of the conversations when you are electing your school board members, when you're hiring your superintendents, when you're thinking about your school principals. So at every avenue that we are having intentionality around the conversation, from the governor down to folks that are serving food and across the board. So making sure that food advocates are at the table when we talk about these things and providing important input and insight into the right way to do this, I think, is the other big piece of it.
Next question.
Okay. Our next question is from Lainey. Where's Lainey? Who is Lainey? Okay, great. So there were a few questions that were about land, a bunch of questions about both rural and urban land, and a few around urban agriculture. So Lainey's going to ask one around that. And while she's getting ready to ask her question, Paula and Maya, where are you? Because your questions are next up. Paula and Maya is okay. Okay, great.
Here. Maya. Over here.
Hi, I'm Lainey. I'm a PhD student, currently working at the Berkeley Food Institute. And my question was about the role that you see urban agriculture playing in improving or addressing community food security, and how to make urban agriculture more economically viable and equitable if you see it playing an important role.
So I think it can and should play a critical role. I think it's something that our elected officials from the local municipal level to the state legislative and gubernatorial level should have intentionality around. I think it's, if we do it the right way, it can be a win-win-win in terms of reducing our shipping costs, having better, fresher foods, serving food deserts. There are 30,000 people in Richmond that are in a food desert here today, right? So this is one way that I think we can address some of those issues. So any kind of funding mechanisms for that, any kind of incentivizing programs, I would fully support and want to work with folks on to achieve in Sacramento. But I think this is one of the, to me, most eloquent, poignant ways to solve some of the problems that we see across the board when you look at environmental impacts of farming, when you look at access to good quality foods. So I think this is one of the things, to me, it's a bright, hopeful spot that our elected officials and legislative leaders should be pushing and working with local electeds to do.
I really like the model that we saw in Oakland with food co-ops, right? Because Richmond, El Cerrito, Richmond in particular, we lost several grocery stores. We lost the one at Hilltop, it was the Lucky's years ago. Then we lost Safeway and Lucky that were directly across the street from each other. It's kind of annoying.
It was off, but everybody should be on.
Thank you.
Share my phone.
Yes. And so I think that's unacceptable to me. But what I can be proud of is that right here in Contra Costa County, right here in Richmond, through our food policy programs, we had a goal of growing 5% of our food locally. And I'm really happy to say tonight that we've exceeded that goal. We are now growing 5% of our food locally because that's really the sustainable model that we have to use throughout the state of California. And so with that said, I think it's important that we provide grants for our farmers. I think it's important that we provide grants for our entrepreneurs who want to start food co-op, grocery stores even. We've seen some of that happening here with our entrepreneurs. We have a bicycle co-op here in Richmond. We can do the same thing with a grocery store, but we have to have the political will, right, to be able to support these types of initiatives.
Great, so this is our second to last question, and we have two that were really, we thought, akin to each other. Maya, do you mind if I just read yours from here? Okay, so I'm going to read Maya's, and then Polly, you can read yours, and you can hear how there's a connection between them. So Maya's question is that poor and food insecure people don't have the time, knowledge, or resources to lobby in Sacramento. How do we ensure their issues get the attention and funding they deserve, especially at times when funding is so scarce?
People,
It's going to be a two-part question. And then Eli, you're up next, and Eli will be the last question.
Hi, my name is Paola. I'm a Farmer Justice Fellow with Pesticide Action Network. Thanks for speaking here today. So my question is somewhat related to that. It goes back to both of you talking about the Farmer Equity Act earlier. So my question is, how will you use your political capital to uplift the voices of the grassroots, in that case, the farmers of color, those most marginalized in the food system, those most harmed by pesticides, those most impacted by climate change, in this movement for an equitable and sustainable food system in this district and in California?
right, and right now, I use my platform right now as a Richmond City Council member to do just that, to listen to the people, and you can trust that that's going to be the same way I operate in Sacramento with your support to be able to be a servant to you all. But you know that, you can trust that when you elect people whose platform is based on putting people over profit in everything I do and everything we do. And that's how you know, because it's one thing to talk a good game, and then it's another to look at track record. And that's why I'm really, really proud to be endorsed by every grassroots organization, local organizations in this district. And that is, and that's healthcare organizations, that's food organizations, that's healthcare organizations, that's housing organizations. And so the people know that, and that's why I've been endorsed, and I'm really happy about that. But it's not just about me. This is a movement that we are a part of, a movement to take back our government from control of corporations. And you do that by again, following the money, right? And following the money, you will find who you can actually trust. We don't have health care right now because although we have a Democratic majority in Sacramento, we don't have it for a reason, because the speaker took $400,000 from the pharmaceutical companies. He's not working for us. We need people who are going to be working for us.
So I spent my entire career in grassroots organizing, in the labor movement, on political campaigns, on issue advocacy campaigns, and the fundamental premise of organizing, grassroots organizing, is built on relationships and understanding where people are coming from and where their interests are. You know, I just had my 202nd house party on this campaign. I've been in living rooms all across this district, fancy homes, not fancy homes, everything in between, and have spent a lot of time listening to folks in the district in terms of the concerns. And fundamentally, it means that people like you have got to have a seat at the table when our policymakers are thinking about what the solutions are, what the challenges are, and how we come together to do this. And I've spent my entire career bringing together diverse coalitions of people to try to solve these problems, right? And you have to have strong advocates at the table to push the elected officials on this stuff. And so I welcome you in that conversation. If I'm in Sacramento soon, would love to have you at the table for that. You know, I'm very honored to be supported by 19 labor unions, community health clinics, Planned Parenthood, a bunch of great folks. Dolores Huerta's come on board. I'm a trained organizer by Marshall Gans, who came out of the migrant farm workers movement, who teaches organizing about relationship building. And so those are skills I take with me. That's what I want to go to Sacramento and do. I want to go to Sacramento and lead coalitions to address these issues so that we can create equity on issues pertaining to food, so we can create equity around education, around healthcare, and all the things that I think we share.
Thanks. We got our last question coming here from Eli.
Hi, my name is Eli Zigas with Spur. I'm a hybrid of two questions, my own and one from an unnamed person. So there have been a lot of policy ideas you both have mentioned tonight. if you were to go to Sacramento, I'm curious what would be your top 2 priorities that you would push. One, where you had access to state funds, and another policy priority that if you didn't have money, what would the priority be there? So what are the 2? One where you could get some money, one where you couldn't.
Sure. For me, I think there's a lot of things we want to do. I want to do everything. And I had this conversation with Daryl Steinberg, who's the former Senate president, and he's endorsed me, and I said, how do you, if you get the job, what do you do? How do you, like, as a freshman coming in, right? And his advice was pick the issue that's like 3rd or 4th on people's priority list. It's not the sexiest thing because people won't work it as much, and go and really deliver results on that. And so for me, looking at that, what I don't see focused in Sacramento in the way that it should be is what we're doing for our youngest children, 0 through 5. Whether you're talking about education, health, nutrition, and really focusing on 0 through 5, and creating equity there in terms of early childhood care, early childhood nutrition, and focusing on that community. So that costs money, right? So that's an area I'd love to focus in on in terms of what costs resources. Things that don't cost money that I would want to work on, anti-gouging legislation would be one of the first things that I would introduce to stop the gouging of the expensive rental costs in California. We see it obviously dramatically here in the Bay Area, but it's pervasive across the state. That won't cost us anything, but I think it's critical. So those are 2 specific things that I would love to work on. Sorry, I'm getting ahead.
I want to work on my Homes for All platform program. We're seeing so many people becoming homeless, it's unprecedented number, and it's a shame. And people, we have a right as government officials to take care of our residents, to take care of our people. And we can do that. That's something that's tangible. We can do that. That's the part about money. But it will take taxing the rich, plain and simple. We can do that. Because we tax vacant property. When we do that, in fact, we have that on the ballot this November in Richmond. Richmond, Berkeley, and Oakland has a vacancy tax proposal. But we also have to strengthen the right for workers to organize. We have to also provide working people with a living wage, and those are the 2. And then since I have 30 seconds, I'm going to talk about the fact that we also have to work on providing health care for all, because it affects everything that we do. In addition to that, we need and we can, again, by taxing the extremely wealthy, we can have free child care for parents. We can have free preschool, and we can also have tuition-free colleges. And those are the things that I will make a priority as your servant in Sacramento.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We're getting close to the end, and we're going to have a chance for each of the candidates to give another skimpy 1.5-minute closing statement. And I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who put such hard work into it. And my own feeling is, my question as I go to the ballot box, and you don't have to, it's not exactly a question, but I think of my great-grandmother who settled here in Richmond as an immigrant, who didn't speak English, who was a farmer, built a farm, raised 5 children. When you're talking about food, I'm thinking about her cooking for 5 kids and greenhouse employees every day. She was racially profiled by the FBI, of course, and arrested during World War II, and put 5 kids through Richmond Public Schools and UC system. And I hope that whoever wins really feels accountability to this land, to the people that live here, and to the future of this district, and to think 100 years in the future, as I wish people were doing back then. So that's what I'm thinking about as I make my own decision, and I'd love to hear what both of you, your final appeal for everyone to make their own decisions. And either way, I want you to vote for a powerful woman for assembly in this election.
So thank you all so much for coming tonight. Thank you for taking an interest in your government. Thank you for taking an interest in your community. As I said, as a 2-term Richmond City Council member, 8 years on the Richmond City Council, I ask that you take a look at everything that I've done. And everything that I've done has been to improve the quality of life for our residents right here in Richmond. Working, and my perspective of working with children and families, I've seen the needs up front and personal, which is why I ran for city council in the first place, and why now I'm running to be your servant in Sacramento. I ask for your support. We're sitting right now on stolen land, right? We have got to respect the earth. We have got to respect our planet, right? Because it's the only one we have. The planet doesn't need us, we need it. And so it's so important that we respect it. It's so important that we have elected officials who are going to always put the needs of the people and the planet and our children above the need of corporate profit. I'm asking for your vote to help build, to be a part of this movement, this revolution, to take back our government. To take back our government and build a California that works for every last one of us, the many, not just the few. And we can do that. And together, we can have the kinds of policies that we are fighting for and demanding. Policies around equity in food, policies around equity in pay, policies around equity in health. I'd be honored to have your support, Jovanka.org, for more information. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. This was one of the most thoughtful forums I think we've had on the campaign, so I really appreciate you all hosting it. I am so honored to be running for this seat, and I would be honored to be your assemblywoman. You know, I'm someone who comes from pretty humble upbringing. I grew up in a trailer. I don't come from a lot. You know, I went to community college. I worked my way up. I ended up working in progressive politics for 20 years, and working my way up the ladder, and ended up working at the White House. It's a dream for someone like me, right? But I had a ladder up. You know, I had a safety net that allowed me to do that. And I think everyone should be afforded those opportunities in life. And I think we're in a very critical moment in our nation's history right now. You look at our national politics, I can't even go there, right? But you also look at what's happening here in California, that's on us. The fact that our third grade math and reading scores are 43rd in the nation. The fact that we have the highest poverty rate of any state in this country when you take into account cost of living at 40%, and the homelessness crisis that we see every day. I think we need a leader who's going to go to Sacramento and not just vote the right way, but fight the right way and lead the right way. This district deserves someone who's going to go be in the leadership role. And that means bringing people together from diverse coalitions to achieve these public policy dreams that we have, that we know can become a reality. I've worked with diverse coalitions my entire career. It's what I've done. I'd be honored to have your support. I've been endorsed by President Barack Obama, Senator Kamala Harris, Planned Parenthood, 19 labor unions, 7 of the 10 mayors of this district. I'd be honored to have your support. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you again to our candidates. Thank you to all the partners that organized. I encourage everyone to make your plan now for how you're going to get to the polls or where you're going to send in your ballot. And see you soon. Thanks again for coming.